Welcome to Simple Health Radio, the podcast about recognizing medical emergencies and promoting wellness throughout your journey in life. Your host is Dr. Emran, a respected physician who's treated thousands of people just like you over the past 10 years. Listen to the show each week on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and 3 and Out Radio Network. Information provided on this show is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Always discuss your questions with your doctor or go to your nearest emergency room immediately.
Thank you for joining me today on this episode of Simple Health Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Emran. On today's episode, we'll be discussing carpal tunnel syndrome. Carpal tunnel syndrome is a very common condition, and it's becoming a major issue in industrialized countries, but also across the world. First, we'll define what the carpal tunnel actually is. The Greek word karpos means wrist, and that's where the term carpal comes from, but the carpals are actually bones that make up the wrist. They look almost like pebbles or very small rocks. There's a group of them in the wrist, and that creates a tunnel, which also has a band made up of very tight ligament. And that transverse ligament is what creates the carpal tunnel itself. So there's bones in the wrist along with the ligaments overlying it. Through the tunnel runs the median nerve. The median nerve is a very important nerve because it comes from the neck and it supplies the sensation in your thumb and fingers all across the hand. So any condition or problem that will cause swelling or that affects the wrist or the carpal tunnel will squeeze and irritate the median nerve. It's the median nerve symptoms that actually create what we call carpal tunnel syndrome. And so that's where people develop common symptoms, which include numbness, tingling, burning, and pain. It's all because of the nerve that's being squeezed or pinched in the wrist as it goes through the carpal tunnel. Now, there are different causes for why the median nerve will become injured over time. Some of the common causes actually include obesity, pregnancy, a thyroid condition, arthritis, and diabetes. Other causes can occur from work-related stress. So, for example, if someone works in a factory for many, many years, working on power tools or doing twisting and pulling, that puts increased stress on the wrists. It can also come from other repetitive injuries like typing. So people who are on the computer all day, people who have to work on their laptops or they hold their phones very awkwardly, these are all linked with carpal tunnel syndrome. Generally, carpal tunnel syndrome will worsen as time goes on slowly. So it's not going to be in 1 week that people develop the symptoms. It's going to be over many months or years, typically. The symptoms are usually worse at night. So when people are lying down and they're very tired, they may be awakened from sleep due to the pain or the odd numb sensation in the wrist. The people have to wake up and shake their hands in order to regain the sensation. There's different theories as to why this occurs. We believe it's from the position of the wrist when someone is sleeping, but also some fluid or liquid that can accumulate around the wrist when you are lying down flat. As things worsen over time, people often wear night splints, similar to a Velcro brace or a wrap that you would apply to keep the wrist in a neutral position to prevent it from flexing or extending too much, and that can, for some people, reduce a lot of the symptoms. Now, there are different examinations that can be performed to confirm whether truly there is a carpal tunnel syndrome or if there's some other problem. So an EMG, also called electromyogram, is done combined with a nerve conduction test. So the nerve conduction test and the EMG will measure the median nerve along with some of the other nerves and the response in the muscles and the ligaments in that area. If the impulses are abnormal, there's a high risk that the median nerve has already been damaged, and this is carpal tunnel syndrome. In some cases, blood testing will be performed to rule out the other causes. We mentioned earlier diabetes and thyroid concerns. So those may be treatable and possibly curable if the thyroid or the diabetes is properly managed. Now, there are different treatment options once we do know that carpal tunnel syndrome has advanced past a certain point. These typically will involve the night splints, as we talked about earlier, applying ice over the wrists to reduce swelling, modifying activities, for example, changing the keyboard or adjusting the chair height that may provide some relief. Changing jobs may also be a last resort for some individuals, and then surgery is usually the last resort that is considered curative. Now, before people go to surgery, they're usually seen in the emergency department or with their family doctor So they may try some other medications or treatments initially. So these are things like vitamin B6, also called pyridoxine. It is reported it may reduce some of the symptoms in some people, but not for everyone. Corticosteroids, which include cortisone and other steroid injections, may improve the swelling and reduce some of the pain, at least temporarily. Steroid pills can also be used if the consideration is there by your doctor. Typically, though, people are referred to a hand surgeon, a specialist who's going to be doing the procedure, and this is called a carpal tunnel release. So carpal tunnel syndrome is the actual disease which affects the median nerve. A carpal tunnel release is a surgical procedure to create more space in the wrist to allow that nerve to function normally, and that will eliminate the pain, swelling, and numbness and tingling that people are developing over time. Now, in some cases, people delay surgery. So they see the surgeon and they decide they don't want to have the procedure, and that is okay. There's always an option to get a second opinion or a third opinion, or just to deal with it and live with the pain. However, as I mentioned, this is becoming a very common condition, and the best thing to do is to prevent it from developing in the first place. So if you have any consideration or possibility that you're developing carpal tunnel syndrome, either due to your job or your other family activities, or due to diabetes or pregnancy or things along those lines, you need to speak with your doctor. You need to develop a plan to avoid getting to the point where you'll require surgery. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Simple Health Radio. If you have questions about carpal tunnel syndrome or some feedback for one of our next episodes, you can always email me, feedback@simplehealthradio.com. You can also visit our website, simplehealthradio.com, and follow the blogs and provide information as well. You can also follow us on social media, including Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and Facebook. I want to thank our team, which includes Lauren and Julian. They work on the social media. And I want to thank Kelsey, who helps to create our show blogs each week. I look forward to having you on a future episode.